Do you, even when you're doing your music, do you feel like you're co-creating with the architect?
Absolutely. You know, in the music world and the sports world, people always have a term called being in the zone,
Mm.
which is doing what you're doing when you're doing it with no thinkingness, right? You're not in the past, you're not worrying, you're not in the future. You're just doing what you're doing it, and that's the power. So when I go into the zone, I don't even feel like I'm playing. It feels like I'm almost cheating. I can tell I'm just watching my hands play, because one of the revelations I had with all this research is the architect actually expresses itself and its perfection through each of us individuals if we invite it to do so and match the frequency.
Insight and awareness, spiritual explorer. Soul intuitive, emotional and spiritual mentor and award-winning author, Lorraine Nilon.
Welcome, explorers, and thank you for being part of the adventure. And remember, if you're enjoying the content, please like and subscribe. If you want to reconnect more with your soul, heal some of the wounds and recover, rejuvenate your zest for life. These are the kind of guests that we have on the podcast, and we love that you're coming in, listening and watching on YouTube. So today we have our special guest, and it is John Novello, and he's a Grammy award-winning jazz pianist and composer who now is also an author of The Invisible Architect, How to Design Your Perfect Life from Within. So thank you, John, for being part of the adventure.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Well, that's brilliant. Can you tell us, what is your book and what is it about? Why would someone want to pick this book up?
Yeah, let alone I should ask myself, why would I want to write such a thing? Because I never thought I would, being a jazz musician, and all my awards and accolades and expertise has been for many, many, many years as a composer and keyboardist, pianist, et cetera, et cetera. But one day, the invisible architect, who is a name for the creator, the universal energy, the intelligent energy, whatever people's beliefs are, which and who I've had a very interesting relationship with, which is explained in my book since I've been 3 years old, kind of like hit me over the head and said, "You need to write a book about this." And I kind of was, what? Kind of looking up in the air going, "What do you mean a book? You mean another music book?" No, 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 you've already done that.
Okay, so have you always heard a voice? Like you said, at 3-year-old. So were you hearing voices then?
Yeah, at 3 years old, I was sitting in front of the TV and saw an accordion player, and I just said, "Yeah, dad, dad, goo goo." And my mom just figured I wanted to play accordion. But that was the first time I was aware of this voice, and I didn't know what it was. And as I grew older and older, I started realizing that I had this sort of best friend, and it was my inner voice. And eventually I realized it was more than that. And that's what we'll end up talking about. So when I heard the voice again, which I had been hearing all my whole life, that day in bed, and it said, "You need to write a book," I wasn't confused because I always heard the voice clearly, but I was confused at what book. And, and it kind of explained to me our interactions that we've been having all these years and how it's helped you. You need to share with others. And that's how the book came across. And since I already was an author and knew how to write a book, I sat down and started writing an outline and didn't really know where it was going to go, but it was almost channeled the way it came out.
Right, because you've wrote books about music, is that correct?
Right. And then I have another book called The Song That Never Ended, which is about after death communications when I lost my first wife. So that was more of a metaphysical one. And then this would be the second one, sort of.
Okay. So the Invisible Architect is who is the name that you've labelled where we're from, our origins.
Yeah, but the invisible architect to me is the creator, but not necessarily a anthropomorphic being, an energy source that permeates the universe and has created us and everything. And so I decided, since I didn't want to be connected to various other isms, ologies, religions, and beliefs, I wanted my own concept. It gave me that concept. It gave me its name. So that's how that happened, because the architect is the designer of everything, and it's invisible. And so that's how it came about.
And So how do we design a perfect life from within?
Right. So the perfect life was something that it put in there. I had the subtitle as Invisible Architect, How to Design a Better Life from Within, because as within, without, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of got mad at me, I believe it or not, and said, well, wait a minute. I'm all knowing, I'm all perfect, I'm blah, 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 blah. So, no, why aren't we going for a perfect life? And I said, well, I don't know if that title might be a little too heavy. I don't know if I want to be associated. I don't know. It just seems a little much. And eventually, the energy source, the intelligent energy, handled me, and I changed perfect life because it's perfect and it's expressing itself through us. So why can't we be perfect and go for that? So that's how the secondary title came up with, is how to design your perfect life from within.
So what sort of revolutionary and evolutionary things have you experienced that put you in a position that you could write a book like this?
Well, in the book, the first 2, 3 chapters is sort of my background, and there's about 20 miraculous incidents or stories that happened with my interactions with the invisible architect. The first and main one that is pretty startling to this day was I had lost my first wife. I was living in Los Angeles. I'm now living in Nashville. I was living in Los Angeles, and I had lost my first wife to a horrific fight with breast cancer. And I was recovering, was about almost a year later. And I was walking in my living room, and I'm very telepathic and psychic. And I felt my first girlfriend communicating about me to me. She lived in Erie, Pennsylvania when I grew up. And I just felt her presence, and I kind of smiled. I wonder whatever happened to her, and why am I thinking of her now? And so 2 weeks later, I checked my email, and there's an email from my first girlfriend, Barb Simpson. And I smiled again, and I went, uh-huh. I felt her then, and here she is now. So she emailed me, hey, John, it's Barb Simpson. Do you remember me from 15, when we were 15 years old? So I'd been like 36 years since I seen her. And I said, yeah, to make a long story short, we started talking. Remember, I'm just getting over my loss of my first wife. So it was a breath of fresh air, like the architect was sending me to her, because it was an orchestrated, meant to be situation. Because when we split up, I never knew what happened. She just left town with her parents. And so no closure, forgot about it. So I said, by the way, whatever happened to you? You like disappeared. And she told me, and we got into it. Next thing you know, the sparks are flying. And it was really a breath of fresh air, considering I had been grieving for about 11 months. And she, as it was an interior designer, and she told me all about herself. And then we started talking more and emailing and texting. And she goes, I have to come out there soon for an interior design project. And I said, oh, it'd be fantastic to see you. Are you kidding me? So she booked the flight. And about 7 days before the flight, the architect kind of grabs me and says, hey, you need to call Barb up. There's something wrong with that day, and there's something wrong with that flight. Now, this wasn't unusual for me. I've experienced all these kinds of things for 30, 40 years. So I said, oh, what do you mean? There's something wrong with that flight. And he didn't tell me. I'm just using he just to personify.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And hope we don't get in trouble. And I called her up. I said, look, you don't know me. It's been 36 years. You're going to think this is woo-woo, but I got to tell you something. That flight, something's not right with that day and that flight. She's like, what? So she's thinking I'm getting cold feet. And she told her sister, and her sister said, oh, you shouldn't get, he's a musician and he's probably got another girl and he's all this. And I said, you don't understand. And I had to yell at her. So she finally agreed, and she canceled and changed the flight to Friday, which was a few days later. Then that day came. I got up late, being a musician. And when I got up, my phone was filled with about 40 messages, and I had cleaned them out that night. So I started listening to them. Turn on TV. How did you know? Blah, 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 blah. Other people calling me. 9/11. She was absolutely, I think you guessed it, because I could feel
I
you.
kind of did, yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard a few of these stories where
Yeah.
there
And
was
she
a
was on that
pre-warning.
flight, Washington, flight at 78 or 77. And anyway, I became an instant hero with her family and her. And what I always tell, and then eventually, of course, she came out 3 or 4 days later, and it was a fantastic sort of rendezvous. And then we started dating. And if that wasn't a sign from the invisible architect that we needed to get together, then I would have been a dummy, right? So we ended up married. So that's one of many, many, but that is like a huge one.
Yeah, definitely. Do you, even when you're doing your music, do you feel like you're co-creating with the architect?
Absolutely. You know, in the music world and the sports world, people always have a term called being in the zone, which is doing what you're doing when you're doing it with no thinkingness, right? You're not in the past, you're not worrying, you're not in the future. You're just doing what you're doing it, and that's the power. So when I go into the zone, I don't even feel like I'm playing. It feels like I'm almost cheating. I can tell I'm just watching my hands play, because one of the revelations I had with all this research is the architect actually expresses itself in its perfection through each of us individuals if we invite it to do so and match the frequency. And so I've learned how to do that. So every time I go to play, I have to sort of I don't really do a meditation. I just have to almost go into the I am, and it comes. Now, I am is the name of Yahweh or God in the First Testament. I mean, the Old Testament anyway. And if you say I am, then you are. That's it. That's the word, to be or not to be. I am. So when I go into I am a great player, or I am a musician, or I am whatever, it's almost like a possession that happens, and I go into the zone and I play at my highest level. And I can't not do that now. I don't know how to not do that, which is a good thing.
Yeah, that's a really good thing.
It served me. It served me right. So even when I compose, like my last tune before COVID was number one, called Good to Go. I was writing it in the studio. My wife was sleeping, and I was working and carving and using my craft. And all of a sudden, it started to happen. So I let it work its magic through me. And about 2.5 hours later, this song had been carved out, and I went, "Oh my God, thank you. That's number one." So I ran into now, how would I know that? I mean, that's a big statement. I ran into the house, tried to wake my wife up. She was asleep. She didn't want to come out. So in the morning, I told her, and then I called my manager and co-producer up. I said, "Hey," and he always uses, because his buddy is down under. And when I told him, I said, "Hey, Mike, guess what?" And I told him that, right? And he goes, "What?" And I said, "We got a number one song here." And he's a real tough cookie. And I played it for him. And he said, "I don't know how you did that, but I think we do." 6 weeks later, we released it, climbed right up the charts to number one.
And what was the name of the song?
Good to Go.
Good to Go. Just double check, making sure we let people know if they want to go and listen to it.
Yeah, Good to Go. They can go online and type it in, and it's there.
Yeah, cool. So your music and your spirituality are very much entwined.
Absolutely. I don't see how I would have existed or co-created or done anything. And initially, I didn't know that was anything special, because since it started when I was so young, it was almost like growing up with this bodyguard that helped me with knowledge and helped me with decisions and seemed to help me. And I seemed to be on that frequency, because I had somebody at another podcast ask me, "Well, that's never happened to me. How come?" Now I can't say how and why. And I said, "Well, my experience is it does happen to everybody, but most people are too distracted with the lower frequencies and survival frequencies of life. So they're not tuned to that frequency. And so it could be broadcasting, which I'm pretty sure it is, and you're not paying attention." And I do lots of one-on-one mentoring based off the fundamentals in this book. And once I get into making people aware of what I just said, and then go into helping them raise their frequency, an aha moment usually happens. And they realize that, oh, that's there for me too. They just weren't paying attention.
Yeah, it's interesting. And when you do, regardless of what it's about, when you have an aha moment, what you're doing is really aligning with the frequency of truth. It makes perfect sense with you, and you're resonating with that the truth in whatever you're hearing. And that's how we
Absolutely.
yeah, that's how we
Yeah.
get the aha.
And when your frequency raises, all manner of problems go away. You don't have to focus on a situation as much as raise that person's frequency. And once they understand that they are one with the architect, I and the Father are one concept, then the door opens and their true power comes out. But it ain't really their power, it's the power that they're distributing. So I always tell people, sometimes people get mixed up with the law of attraction, think real hard and positive, and they're trying to manifest all these things. And they don't realize that's not what's going on there. You're actually having the invisible architect manifest for you. You're the distributor of that power. And then it really works when they get that differentiation, from my experience.
Yeah. Well, I notice a lot of people when they're into the manifestation, they're really what they're doing is hyping up their control energy and their expectations. So you're actually, in your words, hitting the architecture with your control and your demands. You're not actually in the flow of working, co-creating, working with, and accepting. I always refer to life as like a river. It's got its own flow. It's got its own ebbs and flows. So when you're working with the river and you're flowing with it, you feel more, you see more. But most of us are trying to dam it up or swim upstream or, get stuck in whirlpools, all sorts of things. And that's what distracts us. But
Plus, we also try to do its job for it, and it's more powerful. So we don't know all the networking and orchestration and magical things that it can do that we could never, ever do. And so besides being aware of it and inviting it into your life, because we have free will, it's almost like the Star Trek series, the non-interference policy. What would be the case if it manifested for us and interfered? It wouldn't need us. It's the general and we're the particular, and it expresses itself through us, but only if we invite it into our lives. And then if you're going to invite it, it's like if you're an executive at a company and you hire somebody for a job, are you going to micromanage them and chase them away? Or if they're the right person for the job, you're going to let them get around with it and do that job and then go, wow, that guy's really good, So I've learned that no matter what it starts manifesting for me, even if I don't quite understand it, I just go with the flow and I'll go, oh my God, I would have never thought that.
yeah.
And so I find out a lot of people try to interfere. And I almost get the feeling when that happens, it's sitting there going, really? What are you doing now? Don't you know who I am? It's kind of funny.
Yeah, it is funny. Well, we're slow learners. So what do you think humanity needs to acknowledge and understand for us to evolve?
Well, specifically, I know this sounds almost worn out, but that everything is energy, including us, and this intelligent energy, from a physics point of view, I call it the quantum intelligent energy field, exists. And we are one with that. And if humanity at some point understands that, all the problems of division and separation that are going on individually, in groups, politically, they just go away. Because how could you want to be, why would you want to shoot yourself in your own foot if we're all one? And we've slowly over the many millennia here have gone into losing or never really understanding that we are all one. And therefore humanity is, in my opinion, starting to head down this divisive, separation, me, instead of to be and to service, because I believe an incarnation is not only is about learning and growth, but to service others. And so if you think you're all one, servicing others becomes a pleasure. But if you start thinking you're separately, then the narcissism and the ego and things start,
Mm.
permeating, and things start going off kilter.
Yeah, it's a good answer. So when we're looking at your book, what are the fundamentals in the book?
Yeah, the fundamentals are be, do, have, sequence, and the law of thought substitution, and everything is energy. These three things. So let me explain. So the be, do, have, most people have backwards. Geez, if I had a lot of money and I had the connection that that guy, I'd be able to do X, Y, and Z, and I would be whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I had a lot of money, I could afford to go to college, or if I had whatever. So it's really be first that then moves towards do, that then creates the have. So if anybody has, and we all do, have an undesirable situation, what we're saying is we have an undesirable have in our universe. Cause, distance, effect is cause creating a have, a havingness. So most people put their attention on the non-ideal situation and try to fix it. That is a disaster, because all you're doing is validating the thing that you don't even realize you're creating and or co-creating. So if you wanted to be wealthy, you wouldn't put your attention in my mortgage and my bills and why me and all this kind of stuff. You would go, okay, I don't understand the frequency of abundance and wealth. I'm not being abundance or wealth. So I need to figure out how to get at that frequency. And it's interesting. It's almost like being born again. You cannot pour new wine into a glass that's already filled, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you already got this havingness, that's not an ideal situation. Instead of going back and trying to figure out how and why it happened, you just need to repostulate the correct havingness. So the correct havingness would be, just to be glib here, I'm abundant or I'm wealthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you now want to take and make that your be, your affirmation. Now, affirmations are good, but sometimes we don't know how to do them. So if I am wealthy is implanted into our subconscious correctly, and I teach people how to do that so it actually works, usually in the hypnagogic state, which is defined as the state right before you go to sleep or right when you wake up, when you've nulled out the conscious mind, which gets in the way. The subconscious mind is very powerful if it understands what you want to do. So if you get your be very clear in your desire, then you imagine that it's already done. Lots of people talk about this concept, but sometimes don't know how to do it. I call it advanced gratitude. It's like time travel. If you go into the future in time travel and envision and see and feel and emote what your life would be like if you were abundant. So now you left present time and you're in the future and you're seeing John Novello, and he's got money and he's got this card and he's got this and he's got that. And what would my folks think and this and that? Look at my life. And it becomes so clear. You now then take that feeling back from the future and bring it back to the be and envision it and feel it. And there's a term that I got from Dr. Joe Dispenza called remembering the future. So you went into the future, you mocked it all up, and now in your universe, there is no doubt. Some people call this faith, no doubts, no reservations. It's clearly there. So you've now got your be fixed, because the other be was creating the other have, which was not the correct have. So rather than goof around in the have and try to fix it, let's just get rid of the be, the cause, which is you, that's creating that. So be, once you imagine it already done and the advanced gratitude that goes with it, that's what hooks up you to the invisible architect. And it now goes, oh, he's got this. I better get busy and help him. So now instead of you against the world, it is going to express itself, its perfection, through you, because you've contacted it in a way that it understands, and it starts working for you. And then you end up doing things to support it. So there's sort of one be, but it splits off into two do's. The invisible architects, it's orchestrating and doing an architect of your life per year, what you're decided that you want, because it's clear now what you want to achieve.
And you got to
you
know why you want it.
Yes, you got to
Because we
know
have a
everything.
generation that is looking for fame because they will
Right.
think it will remove a sense of feeling not good enough and all those kind of things.
Right,
So
which is not service to others, is it?
no.
Exactly.
So if you understand why you want something, then you can also deal with some of the emotions that are attached to it that are stopping you from being in the flow and being as you're
Exactly.
referring to it. So it's a little bit of a pitfall that a lot of people fall into.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that ends up getting worked out pretty nicely if you are naturally picking a desire. I think, let me back up. I think our desires and goals are implanted before we incarnate.
I
And
agree.
and they're part of the architect and the agreement. And then the amnesia happens, and then we go through our spiritual growth, right? So if we're in tune and we start becoming in tune with that, that's naturally going to be a good goal and a good why. Now, it doesn't mean we can't create evil and we can't create bad things, because it gave us free will. So it's not really good and bad as much as there are experiences to go through. And that's another interesting book probably unto itself.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. But
Yeah,
it is. It's very.
there could be problems writing that one, I can see.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, no, it's interesting because we do, there's a lot of talk about those things, but it's like if we're looking at being, I agree with you. I think there's a blueprint that we come in with and we can get in the way of it. We can get, where we can get in the way of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's like the more authentic you become, the more present you are in what you are already experiencing, that will give you the stepping stones to follow your own direction, the path that, that is loosely made in your blueprint. So, so it's interesting. So it's.
Yeah. So what I do when I work one-on-one with somebody, I go through the fundamentals of my book, because the other fundamental that's important, being in the Nashville area, I'm in sort of the Bible Belt, so I end up working one-on-one with a lot of Christians, and of course they have their biblical scriptures, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this one guy was like, he was going, well, how come ask and you shall receive doesn't work for me, right? So it was an interesting question. I liked this question. I said, well, when you ask and you don't receive, do you believe or do you go into doubt? All the time I go into doubt. And I says, well, so I gave him this fundamental in my book called The Law of Thought Substitution, which is, in the physical universe, no two physical objects can occupy the same space at the same time, just a law of physics. If it could, you and I would fall through the floor, fall through the earth, cars would, So it also works in the thought universe. So there's a chapter on the different universes to understand. I have a universe, you have the universe, the architect has a universe, there's a physical, and if you understand and can separate universes and energy flows, you can act accordingly. So the moment
I refer to them as your collective, like you're a little collective within yourself, within a mass collective.
Yeah, that's a good word. I like that, mass collective. So if you put it this way, if you mock up a bee and it's your desire, and out of your right side of your mouth, it's very clear, and out of the left side, it's going, but I'll never achieve that. Well, you're actually, on a physics point of view or a mathematical or a logic point of view, counteracting it. So the original law of attraction or law of causation, which I prefer as a better name, is always working. People think it doesn't work. It's always working, but it's manifesting what you're doing, but you don't have control of your thoughts and beliefs. I put an example in my book. If you ever jumped into a cab in New York, he's going to go, where to? And you're going to go down to the village, puts his thing down. 5 blocks into it, you go, I'm not feeling so good. Maybe I should go back to the hotel. He doesn't care. He's getting paid. He turns around. You're halfway to the hotel. No, I think I'm hungry. Let's go to the deli. After a while, he's probably going to throw you out of the car. You're driving him crazy because you don't have a clear destination, so he can't get you there. But here's the problem. I don't know why it works this way, but the architect is totally patient. It's got all this knowingness and power, and it doesn't care. So if you mock up, I'm going to be a fantastic math teacher, and then on the TV, it's starting to say that teachers aren't doing good, they don't make much money, so you change your desire, and you keep changing your desire, or somebody says this and somebody says that, this original potent desire is now getting alloyed. And it's almost like a little mouse running around that's not getting any, little Energizer bunny that's just not ever getting anywhere. So I have to, when I work with people, show them how to control their thoughts and focus. And the law of thought substitution says the moment any pushback from your mind, and you have to be able to recognize that, which is part of the training, comes into your space that's contra survival to your original be, you have to nip it in a butt right away, become aware of it, and then put back in and substitute back in the correct thought or any thought other than this negative thought. You could even say, I love my doggy, which is a better positive thought than the I can't do this. So we're back to be or not to be is the question. So when you go to be, if you keep going not be's, after you do the be, that original be just never gets anywhere. So you don't even get to the do, but in actual fact, you end up creating an unideal have. And now you go, yeah, the law of attraction doesn't work for me. And I go, no, it's working perfectly. You just don't know how to control your thoughts. I used to teach dogs. I could take the dog in 5 minutes, train it to sit and do everything. And they go, wow, that was quick. Give the leash to the owner and the dog pulls him and goes all over the place because he has no control of the dog. So control of thoughts, I teach them the law of thought substitution, so how they can apply that in their life all the time. And it takes a little discipline to learn how to do it because most of the time people get negative. They don't even know they're negative while they're being negative.
Actually, it's interesting, and I can't remember the name of the athlete. He was a disabled athlete in a wheelchair, and he spoke about his cockiness, his arrogance. He said, like, I thought I had complete control over everything, and he came out into the stadium and he was going to win. He'd felt it, he knew it, and anyway, as he came out, he's tipped over his wheelchair, and anyway, he didn't get to race, or he didn't get the results he wanted. But he actually took a different approach. He said there was a life lesson in that for me, is when I aligned with arrogance and control, then I wasn't. I was making the universe all about me, and I forgot that I was in part of a shared experience with others, with whatever you want to call where we come from. Mm-hmm. So he said that moment, even though it was exactly the opposite to what I had envisioned for myself, was the perfect moment and perfect lesson for me to understand the world doesn't just revolve around me.
Right. Well, that's the variable. This method and concept can help you manifest anything. But if that's not part of your blueprint and you need to have gotten sick on purpose to learn something, now what manifestation you do, you're going to end up getting sick and you're going to end up learning that lesson that comes from that growth. Like my wife just passed away a couple years ago. My second wife, the one that I saved.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. And initially it was, wait a minute, we just moved here and blah, 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 blah. And then I realized that loss, that was her exit point that she chose for her reason, and her race was done, and my race wasn't done. And I needed to experience that loss, which was horrific. But the person that I am now compared to the person that I was is night and day. So that was something that was in my incarnation blueprint below my awareness that eventually was going to come out, and I knew I had a co-creation in all of that. So you're absolutely right. But the way the actual manifestation formula works is you get that B, keep it clear, imagine that it's already done, and let the architect do its work, and you co-create with it, and you'll get to that have, as long as during the process you don't go into any disbelief or not be's, because B plus not B cancels it out, and you
Yeah.
end up getting a different result. So
Yeah, I can see how that works. All right, well, it's time for Flip the Book. So would you like book 1, 2, or 3?
I think it's 2. That's what the architect's telling me.
Okay. So what page would the architect like as well? As 1 to 430.
How about 310?
310. So this is in your Insight and Awareness book. And I'm the author of this, but yeah.
What a way to get acquainted with you.
Yeah. So you have 5 paragraphs to pick from.
How about the first one?
Okay. So when you deny your ability to resolve your unresolved emotions, you cling to what you believe will protect you. If you believe it is your images and illusions that will protect you, you will go to great lengths to validate and secure your images and illusions. You will permit yourself to lie and to perpetuate whatever is unresolved within your soul's unconsciousness. So that's what you refer to as your lower frequencies. So the collective energy of your unresolved emotions, belief systems, fears, all those kind of things would register as your soul's unconsciousness. Some people call it shadow self, that kind of thing.
Right.
When you deny the reality of your awareness of yourself and align to control structures, you deceptively uphold your images and illusions. When you adopt mankind's embedded beliefs of the importance of images and illusions, you use them to defend your own soul denial. This has you denying the uniqueness of your soul and the significance of who you are, which prolongs your own soul oppression. So, and that comes under the chapter of images and illusions. So where does that take you?
Well, it's sort of analogous to something that we were talking about. That's an undesirable havingness. That's what it creates. And by doing what you're saying, the activities in there, you're actually validating the lower frequency. And then that ends up producing more of the same and even other lower frequencies that are tangents or peripheral to that. And so, in order to get out of that, in my methodology, I would have to become aware of the create B of the higher frequency, and then I would use the law of thought substitution in order to not go where that goes and where it takes.
Yeah, you'd have to be aware. To deal with that, you'd have to be aware of the reality of images and illusions that you have, which they can be quite sneaky too, that you don't. I remember
Oh,
when I
very
first.
insidious. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's a good
totally
word.
insidious. Yeah.
Yeah,
Almost,
definitely.
I call them dream thieves.
Yeah, that's a good word. That's it.
Yeah, because that's when I work with people, that's why I always go back to the whole concept. I didn't want to be a one-on-one mentor. I wanted to write this book as a successful jazz guy and share from a jazz musician's point of view how I mastered the instrument and became successful. After I wrote the book, I started to get people emailing me, asking me questions. You've probably had this happen with your books because you're an author. And then I realized that some of these concepts trying to be done by themselves are almost impossible depending on the person's endowment and abilities. So I did a little pilot program and I took 6 different people through the book chapter by chapter, but on a one-on-one basis, 100% results every time. Whereas people doing it on their own, they weren't getting, and I thought, it's my responsibility ethically. I can't just write this book, throw it against the wall, and don't care if anybody gets anything and it helps them. So then the voice was like, yeah, guess what, buddy? You you got to do, you got to go a little further. So I started a whole one-on-one mentoring. And I don't want to be a Tony Robbins and have thousands of people under me that I'm coaching, since I already make money and do things musically. I said, I'm just going to one-on-one people that somehow get to me. I'm going to work just with a select few people. And it's happening that way. It's just, and I love doing it because I never thought I'd be passionate about something else more than music. But I actually love this because music inspires and raises people's frequency and entertains, which is great. But at the end of the day, they go back to their frequency. But this one-on-one mentoring, using some of these principles, I can actually help transform people spiritually and self-help and personal development. So I like it.
Yeah, you look like you're enjoying what you're doing. So
Yeah.
I want to thank you for being part of the podcast, and I've enjoyed the conversation.
I have enjoyed it as well.